Hello ladies and gentlemen, it's time for phase 2 of the anniversary banner. Our new character is Evanescia, and the reruns are pretty interesting with Tribbie, Sunday, and feixiao. This is basically just my opinion on the value of these units from my own experiences with account piloting and using my own account, so feel free to check other creators for their opinion. And hopefully this helps in deciding to pull these units for your account specifically. I can't capture all use cases, so I'll try my best to create a good enough blanket recommendation for each of these units. With that out of the way, let's go. First character is Evanescia. Evanescia is an elation unit that dual scales up certified banger and energy. What I mean by that is that she has a spammable and stackable ultimate like Yun Li that is almost all of her damage, and she can convert the energy she gains into certified banger and certified banger into energy. So if you gain 30 energy, you gain 30 certified banger and vice versa. Which means that in practice, whether you are in an elation team or not, Evanescia can naturally gain hundreds of effortless certified bangers for her elation damage. And if you are running an elation team, the team generates energy for her through generating certified banger. So you're not missing out on ult frequency in mono elation team. This means that, yes, Evanescia is an elation unit that doesn't strictly have to use elation or normal energy teams because she can make up for either one's weaknesses. This makes Evanescia the first elation unit that doesn't outright die outside of the elation design structure, which is quite nice. It is fair to say though that Evanescia is still a unit that is designed around mono elation's power level. At the current moment, she suffices with using units like Sparkle and EMC, but you will inevitably need her mono elation team since HSR really doesn't like units that have this type of flexibility. Just ask Anoxa. At some point, Evanescia will want to run her mono elation team to be truly efficient. This is backed up by her own eidolons being high increases only in elation teams, with none truly favoring the other teams she could run. All of this to say, her flexibility is volatile and temporary, and I would go against pulling Evanescia if you don't have plans to pull Yao Guang. But right now, before she gets sucked up by the elation vortex, she is quite an interesting unit, and if you like wackier team building styles, nothing lasts forever anyway, so you might as well enjoy it while it lasts with Evanescia. Because of 3-team content coming very soon, I decided to change my approach on reviewing units like Evanescia who have flexibility. In Anomaly Arbitration, due to how high damage checks can be, many team comps are rendered unable to full star. Thus, flexible units with weaker buffs have the danger of not fitting a team at all since the demand is too high. Someone like E0 Tribbie, for example, can struggle with full starring AA due to this. But at the end of the day, Anom is optional and the rewards are not that big. It is more important to plan for Starward mode, since Starward mode actually has Jade rewards that have the 3-team structure just like AA but with lower HP. So I think it's more important to focus on this metric instead of Anomaly Arbitration. So, how good is Evanescia in Starward mode? She is very strong for Starward mode and Anomaly Arbitration. While there are some debuffs in AA that counter her energy playstyle, her numbers are high enough that she can clear using units like Sparkle and EMC, who are shockingly very cheap at the moment. Of course, whether that lasts for a good while is a different question, but in Starward mode, Evanescia is amazing due to her ability to mesh with all target counts and can be heavily rewarded in certain modes. In MOC, Eva's numbers are high enough in any target scenario that she won't struggle. In Apocalyptic Shadow, Eva's toughness damage is fine enough and she's not going to struggle any more than a normal hyper carry. In some cases, the energy refill can send her into the outright broken territory. In Pure Fiction, the amount of AoE and enemy hit energy bodes very well for Evanescia, and of course all of the elation enemies on top of that she can very easily counter. Add this to the fact that she is flexible enough in Starward to not need mono elation if you're scraping to mix and match team comps, she can be incredibly useful. At this point, I would tell you how to invest in Evanescia, but many CCs have already done that, so I'm going to add a special segment for the types of accounts that would pull her. Unlike Silverwolf, Eva doesn't jump off a cliff without her best in slots and doesn't necessitate eidolons to do her role well. If you have Yao Guang at any capacity, Eva will be an incredible unit for your account. She's the closest that I would say is a must-have for Evanescia to survive in the future, but besides that, Eva can use Sparkle, EMC, and RMC, and the pool of general generalists if you haven't pulled Yao and are strategizing for the rerun. EMC and Yao Guang are the only ones she's really tied to the hip for, and can rotate with generalists at the current moment and do decent enough damage. This means that Evanescia is a pretty easy blanket pull recommendation, since accounts are very likely to have a team that she can already use and not have to bend over backwards to make her functional, like a Sparksy or Silverwolf that heavily needs Yao Guang. So let's talk about the reruns now, and first is Sunday. The last time we saw Sunday was in 3.8 with the surprise 2-week delay banner with Aglaya. I've said a bit about what I thought about Sunday around that time, that being he truly doesn't have a real best in slot spot anymore, even in teams that logically need him like Saber. After that patch, Sparkle got a Nova Flare that had the same problem of offering so much amp that Sunday's energy just wasn't as good in general even for energy teams. The HP spike and the lack of updates for his primary DPSs left also hurt him, and generally the environment being unfriendly to a support that can't support elation units is pretty bad. Yes, Evanescia doesn't actually like Sunday due to disliking double turns and finding Sparkle's general damage amp much more compatible with elation. On top of his other problems before this, Sunday is very difficult to recommend. Yes, Sunday is flexible, but if you actually sit down and list the units that he could support, they are either 1.x, which was way too weak, off meta 2.x units like Yun Li, or 3.x units who have to wean off Cyrene now, or the latest unit Ashvale who still prefers Sparkle, or the upcoming Blade to swipe Sunday's place in an Ashvale team. And Sunday Funds is better off being melted into an E1 tribbie for Ashvale purposes either way. In the current day and age, an E0 Sunday is simply much less value than anything else you can pull, counting eidolons on actual generalists or more specific units. His flexibility is kind of fake in a way that the wide amount of teams that can use him aren't strong enough to be really worth pulling him for. Or, these teams would be much stronger if you replace Sunday with something else more specific. That doesn't mean Sunday is worthless though, because we are almost in the era of 3 teams. You might have to use Sunday since your roster just doesn't give you a choice. So he does have some value still if he's still in your account. It's just that taking Sunday means you're accepting a worse unit that's good enough to clear when you could have used something else that could clear much better. And honestly, there's enough teams like Break, DOT, Elation, and Mono Rem that are strong that you still might not run Sunday at all, since you only need to run 3 teams and Sunday might not be involved in any one of them. In Anomaly Arbitration, his flexibility almost doesn't exist at all, since so many units get filtered by the damage check. But Star Ward is more important and has less HP, so let's talk about that. Just like every other support, Sunday is bound by his teammates, and in the perspective of Star Wars mode, there is only really 3 that stand out in his DPS pool: Aglaya, Ashvale, and Phynon. Aglaya is much weaker now in Pure Fiction as her main weakness, while being decent enough at MOC and AS. Though Aglaya E1 will serve you better than pulling Sunday in any capacity. Ashvale is always AoE reliant and has a replacement coming very soon, and Phynon just works everywhere. The units are decent enough to 5 cycle, but Star Wars wants more than that, and units that overperform but niche are much more rewarded than someone like Sunday. Either way, even though Star Wars is less difficult than Anom, it still isn't a freebie, and if you still don't have Sunday and are itching to think that his buffs are the best for your account, I would heavily exercise caution. HSR has been going through the niche route for a while now, and it's gone on long enough that there aren't many new DPSs that actively like them compared to something else. This is an overall HSR problem and not really Sunday's fault, but he is nonetheless one of its victims. But maybe he'll get a Nova Flare to compensate for it, right? Who knows? So is Sunday a good pull? Not really. There's just so many better ways to upgrade your account, and even his highest value scenarios have better options. Aglaya and Phynon would have preferred their own eidolons instead of a Sunday, Ashvale with different teammates instead of Sunday, and Weld preferring eidolons on either Tribbie or Sparkle instead of Sunday. But Sunday is not a complete brick due to 3-team endgame. If you're a Nova Flare coper, then I guess that's another reason too, but at the current moment, Sunday is only a blanket recommendation for Phynon and Aglaya that already have their eidolons so they don't have to use Cyrene, or Ashvale if your archer is keeping Sparkle captive. So he's not useless, but not an efficient pull either. I would love a Nova Flare to make this age horribly, by the way. Just know what you're getting yourself into if you want to pull Sunday, and you'll be fine, I think. Next is Tribbie. Okay, you may have seen the image of me calling Tribbie the most overrated character, so I guess here's the elaboration. Tribbie has a similar problem to Sunday, but to a much less extreme degree, and has a way to actually get out of it. If you've been living under a rock for the past year, Tribbie is the most universal and flexible character in the game. Any type of stat scaling, even some elation units can theoretically use Tribbie, and DDD spam never goes bad, truly. However, we have come to the point that even that isn't enough by itself anymore. Tribbie's general amp is now being competed against Black Swan and Ash Veil of all people. Tribbie was released in an era where buffers started to do damage, and in the current era, there are now DPSs that have extreme buffs that are even better than hers even in general context. Much like Sunday, this has gone pretty bad enough that Tribbie's best units like Herta are not reliable without an eidolon somewhere to compensate. You can be universal like Tribbie all you want, but it only matters on the teams that could clear. And for an E0 Tribbie, let me just mention Cypher E0 to Slander Farm, that list has gotten significantly thinner. So Tribbie's flexibility like Sunday is fake, right? Well, not exactly. Unlike Sunday, Tribbie has the one thing that can allow her to escape, her E1. This E1 is so good due to how generally applicable it is. It is not only a 24% final damage increase in almost every team, but also how intelligently it redistributes damage genuinely makes it a powerhouse. This is so mechanically crucial for units like Herta, Ashvale, and the new Blade SP that without it, they lose a ton of damage. There's no coincidence that similar eidolons like Everknight's E1 are so valuable because they work so similarly, but Tribbie being a general buffer makes it even more valuable for some people than it is on Everknight. It is strong enough that Tribbie actually is the generalist many people portray her as at E1. She is gainfully employed in Rem Split teams, Ashvale teams, soon to be Blade SP teams, Evanescia teams, and just huge AoE fights without an issue at all. I should repeat that only E0 Tribbie has actual damage amp problems. I am of the opinion that if you don't have Tribbie yet, she is not recommended. But E1 is a completely different unit and crosses the threshold of being a true generalist. In terms of endgame, she works in anything that isn't pure single target. Pure single target makes her much less worth it due to energy issues gutting DDD and her E1 not being really used all that well. Her standout performances in PF deserves to be mentioned. Pure Fiction is so bad to play without shilling that a Tribbie E1 to brute force a Herta or Mighty on is very useful, especially in Star Wars mode. So, does your account actually want to get Tribbie? As said before, Tribbie E0 and E1 are completely different units. Tribbie at E0 has standout performances in PF, but outside of that, lacks the modern amp to be any better than modern E0 units. If Mortenox Blade releases as he is, Tribbie E0 is not worth it at all. At E1, Tribbie's amp is a considerable enough of a spike to be considered over other options. If you're trying to do Rem Split, Tribbie's E1 is valuable to make it possible. Ashvale needs Tribbie E1 at this point more than Blade at E0. Herta's biggest jump outside of E2 is Tribbie E1 to make her much more valuable. For accounts that are only looking at a one-cost jump for Tribbie E1, she can actually be quite efficient. The biggest reason you wouldn't is if E0 Mortenox Blade is a bigger upgrade, which means you want to revive Acheron. But even Mortenox Blade as a main DPS likes Tribbie E1 more than his own Eidolon funnily enough, so he doesn't outright replace Tribbie's value at E1. You do have to be careful still. If you're in the progress of building something else like Final or Break, there's plenty of other investments over Tribbie E1. But for a general recommendation, if you aren't spending 2 costs for Tribbie E1, I think she's a fine choice. And last but somewhat the least is feixiao. Feixiao is a follow-up attack damage dealer. She spams ultimates based on hit count, and yeah, that's it. Feixiao suffers from a thing that I'd like to call the Zila syndrome. Her performance is rated based on a minority that can maximize her insanity. This has led to many situations where people pull feixiao because of the hype, play feixiao, realize they got better scores using something else without synthesizing 500 win set pieces, and then give up. This is feixiao in a nutshell. The only people that would see value in pulling feixiao right now already don't need a pull guide, and people that do need a pull guide should never pull feixiao in 2026. Feixiao's achievements are not to be minimized though. It is genuinely impressive feixiao can even do anything at all, especially if you look at Acheron or everyone else from 2.x that isn't Firefly. But many people heavily overestimate themselves and severely underestimate zero cycling. The fact of the matter is that while zero cycling doesn't matter, and if a unit can't zero cycle doesn't mean that their bad is true. If psychopaths are not zero cycling with a unit like feixiao, you are not going to have a good time 5 cycling with your much more mediocre non-private server gameplay. And if it takes you that much effort to blow something up when something much cheaper does it without blinking, then what does a unit like feixiao actually matter for? Again, feixiao doing anything at all is impressive, but please be wary of how much setup it takes, the speed tuning, the relics, the enemy RNG, the fact that you need sustainless and even defensive substats min-max to do it. It's all very technical, but the reward isn't worth it at all. They also seemingly are very adamant in trying to make a follow-up team that doesn't involve feixiao, as shown by both Ash Veil and Mortenox Blade. So even feixiao's feature with a Nova Flare seems extremely sketchy compared to a Sunday. In the 3 endgame modes, I would not trust feixiao with a single one of them. At this point, Ash Veil is better off not using her at all, funnily enough, in every scenario. It is actually quite upsetting. But much like a worse version of Finon, her E2 does save her to be more reliable. But again, there's plenty of other DPSs that just do it better without that much effort. So overall, should you get feixiao? No. My blanket recommendation in every case, even if you're closing in on E2, is no. This isn't because E2 feixiao is unclearable or unusable, but because if you have to ask to pull for a unit like this that takes so much work to make it happen, then you really shouldn't do it. If you want to pull feixiao, you have to do it under your own volition that her gameplay is fun and you're a psychopath and not through the recommendation of others. Otherwise, I think you'll be very disappointed. Actually, if you have to watch a Waveman video, then you don't know enough about the game to be satisfied with feixiao. I'm just being honest. She truly is for the elite in terms of gameplay, and you will be gatekept if you're not part of it. It is what it is. She's a novelty tool for fun that elite players use to flex their gameplay at this point more than for sensible and realistic clearing. Anyway, that's all for this video. Sorry for this video being late. I've been having health issues recently, and hopefully I'll get it sorted out to finally fix my upload schedule. I'll see y'all next time, and I hope you have fun pulling these banners if you are pulling for them. Let me know down in the comments if you're actually pulling. Maybe I should have said that first. Anyway, bye!